Welcome to the very first episode of Bullet Point. My name is Sarah, and I'm here to take you on this journey. Thank you for being here. Buckle up and let's get started. It's 1983 in Louisville, Kentucky. Sonny's Halo won the Kentucky Derby last month, and the city is ready for the summer to begin. Our story takes us to the Bashford Manor neighborhood in the central part of the city. Ann Gotlib is a 12-year-old Russian immigrant with red hair and freckles. She lives on Gerald Court with her mother Ludmilla and her father Anatoly. The family left Russia in search of the American dream, but sometimes dreams turn into nightmares. On the first day of summer break, Ann boarded a bus headed for the Jewish Community Center. She had plans to meet her friend Rachel to play tennis. Rachel and Ann played a few matches, and then Rachel's mother drove Ann home. After arriving home, Ann left again, this time riding her bike to visit her friend Tanya Ochmansky. They watched TV in Tanya's apartment until Ann's mother called to say it was time to come home. Ann and Tanya rode bikes together toward Bashford Manor Mall, which was on Ann's way home. When they neared the parking lot, they said their goodbyes and parted ways. Ann never made it home. When Ann didn't return home, her mother walked to Bashford Manor Mall looking for her. She found Ann's bike leaning against a pillar outside the Bacon's department store, which later became Dillard's. Ludmilla noticed that the kickstand was in the down position. Ann knew the kickstand didn't work, and she had a habit of laying the bike down on the ground instead of propping it up. Ludmilla was sure someone else had placed the bike there. She contacted the police. The Louisville Police Department responded and took a report. 2 teenage girls stated that they witnessed a man drag Ann into a ditch near the mall. Hundreds of volunteers would come out and join a massive search for Ann, but would come up empty. A police bloodhound picked up her scent and led police to the window of an apartment across the street. The apartment belonged to Esther Ochmansky, the grandmother of Ann's best friend Tanya. The grandmother insisted that Ann had never been inside her apartment. Police concluded that the dog became confused and distracted by the smell of cooking food. The Ochmanskys were investigated and cleared. The teenage girls were later given polygraphs and both failed. That was just the beginning of dead ends, bad tips, hoaxes, and reported sightings that the police and the FBI would investigate. About a month later, an anonymous caller reported on July 4th that Ann was being held by a religious cult in a house on Blue Lick Road. Police investigated this, but there was no such house found. On July 6th, 1983, police received a tip from a caller who was concerned about a fresh mound of dirt at Long Run Cemetery in Louisville. An investigation revealed that a groundhog was cleaning out his den. A Jefferson Community College professor reported one of his students for writing a suspicious essay about stalking and torturing a red-headed female. An investigation led to the student's apartment next door to Tanya Ochmansky. He said he had written a dramatic story to try to impress his teacher. The student passed a polygraph. On July 22nd, local police and the FBI received a ransom demand. An anonymous caller demanded $45,000 be dropped in Sebastopol, California. The caller said he would call back the next day with details, but he never did. A suspected child molester was questioned 3 weeks after Ann's abduction. Ralph Barry Barber was suspected of molesting a 10-year-old girl on a jogging track at the Jewish Community Center where Ann's family frequented. The jogging track is just 4 miles from where Ann was last seen. The Nicholasville, Kentucky man was also suspected of exposing himself to 2 6-year-olds just hours before Ann vanished. What a nice man. Barber admitted to the incidents involving the 3 children and acknowledged abusing half a dozen others in Kentucky and Indiana. However, 3 witnesses said he was in Lexington Trophy Shop at the time of the abduction. I hope he burns in hell. In 1983, police received and investigated more than 180 tips, but were no closer to finding Ann. They put up billboards of Ann with a reward for information of her whereabouts. It was one of the first kidnapping, missing child abduction cases to use this technique. There were reports of several girls in the New York City area that were also believed to be Ann. These were each identified as someone else. There was a theory that the Russian government kidnapped Ann in an attempt to force the Gotlibs to return to Russia. The FBI fully investigated this theory and it was quickly dismissed. There was also speculation that Ann had run away from home because she was having a difficult time adjusting to this American life. Ann's family said she seemed happy and had no more anxiety than any girl her age. It was also noted that all her money and favorite possessions were found in her room. The most promising suspect was a man who broke into a police officer's home in September of 1983 and stabbed the officer's teenage daughter during an attempted rape. Gregory Lewis Oakley, Jr. was placed at the mall just hours before Ann's disappearance. Bank records showed that Oakley visited the Liberty National Bank located in the mall parking lot just about 100 minutes before Ann vanished. Oakley lived just 1 block north of Gotlib's apartment. He was a USDA inspector, which meant he carried a badge. Being a meat inspector also means he had access to slaughterhouses where he could easily dispose of a body. Oakley denied any involvement, and there was never any physical evidence linking him to Ann. His girlfriend, at the time, supplied an alibi for him. Oakley lived just 1 block north of Ann Gotlib's apartment. I already said that. Oakley was convicted of the rape of the 13-year-old girl in the September 1983 incident. He received a 30-year sentence and was remanded to the Kentucky State Reformatory. She later became a police officer and revealed her identity in an interview in 2008 about the rape. Her name was Lee Mooney Hellinger. Leads began to dry up and time continued to pass as it does. In May of 1984, a made-for-TV movie aired about a missing child featuring Ann's photograph. Afterward, a resident of Boston reported seeing a dirty, freckled-faced girl in the Charleston section of the city. The girl ran away when called by the name Ann. A search by 200 detectives yielded nothing. Within the first 5 years of Ann's disappearance, police and FBI agents interviewed more than 1,000 people. Anatoly and Ludmila Gotlib remembered Ann each year on the anniversary of the abduction by holding a candlelight memorial. They were always hopeful that Ann would return, but the years were beginning to pass by. In 1990, Michael Lee Lockhart, a Texas death row inmate, claimed responsibility for killing 20 to 30 young girls, including Ann. He also claimed that he buried her body at Fort Knox, where he was on active duty there. Military records confirm that Michael Lee Lockhart was stationed at Fort Knox at the time Ann went missing. About 15 people with shovels spent 3 days digging up a remote tank range, but found nothing. At that time, police discounted the tip. About 3 years later, Lockhart provided the Gotlibs with a map of the alleged burial. The family asked permission to dig at the Army post. Initially, there was no response from officials at Fort Knox. The Gotlibs held a news conference stating that the Army was refusing to let them search the post at the location on the map. A spokesman for Fort Knox stated that he found no one with the military police or the Post's Criminal Investigation Division, who had heard from the Gotlibs. He advised that, as was the case in 1990, they would fully cooperate with the FBI and would allow them to search parts of the Post, but this would be contingent on the evidence that was provided. Jefferson County Police went to the Post but could find no terrain that matched Lockhart's map. A search was not made. In 1992, an inmate at the Kentucky State Reformatory came forward and told investigators that his cellmate had confessed to the abduction and murder of Ann Gotlib. Police dismissed this because the inmate had shown a pattern of lying in the past. This inmate said that his cellmate was Gregory Lewis Oakley, Jr. We'll come back to that. In 2008, the Gotlibs remembered their daughter as they marked the 25th anniversary of Ann's disappearance. The local news covered the memorial gathering and interviewed the Gotlibs. Ludmilla and Anatoly were still hopeful and asked the public to contact police with any information they could provide that would bring Ann home. As a result of the news coverage, 2 witnesses came forth with information. One of these was the girlfriend of Gregory Lewis Oakley, Jr. So who is Gregory Lewis Oakley, Jr.? Let's take a look at this douchebag. July 1979. Oakley lived in Pineapple, Alabama, and was identified as a suspect in an attempted assault of a 13-year-old using a hypodermic needle. He injected the victim with ketamine and then fled on foot. He was later convicted of this assault. Gregory Oakley held a doctorate of veterinary medicine, making drugs available to him. He was also familiar with needles. He lost his license due to being convicted. Yay. November 1981. Oakley assaulted his 13-year-old stepdaughter in Alabama. He was charged and pleaded guilty to the offense. What a piece of work. Fall 1982. Oakley moved to Louisville, Kentucky and became a USDA meat inspector for the Louisville office. The USDA somehow missed his criminal record. June 1, 1983, at 3:50 p.m. Bank records show that Oakley visited the Liberty National Bank branch at the Bashford Manor Mall. June 1, 1983, at 5:30 p.m. Ann Gotlib disappears from the mall parking lot while riding her bike on her way home. September 1983, Oakley attempted to abduct 2 young females walking to school on Goldsmith Lane, just blocks from Bashford Manor Mall. September 1983, Oakley stabbed and attempted to rape a 13-year-old named Lee Mooney after breaking into her family's home on Maysmere Court, again just blocks from Bashford Manor Mall. He was convicted and sentenced to 30 years in state prison. In June 2002, Oakley was medically released and returned to his home in Pineapple, Alabama. October 2002, Oakley dies of cancer. In light of the new statements by witnesses in December of 2008, the Jefferson County Commonwealth's attorney, Dave Stengel, held a press conference where he stated he agreed with the Louisville Metro Police Department's finding that Gregory Oakley Jr. abducted and killed 12-year-old Ann Gotlib 25 years prior. Stengel explained that he had reluctantly rejected charging Oakley posthumously because he would be unable to defend himself against the charges. Stengel went on to say that even if a grand jury found that there was probable cause to indict Oakley, a judge would dismiss the indictment because the defendant is deceased. Police stand by their finding of Oakley's guilt, despite a letter Oakley sent to the Louisville newspaper, the Courier-Journal, before his death. In the 2008 interview with Oakley victim Lee Mooney Hellinger, she stated that she believed it was Oakley from the beginning. She had been stabbed and assaulted by Oakley as a teen in 1983, resulting in his conviction and sentence of 30 years. Oakley wrote in a February 26, 2001 letter to the newspaper, quote, "I have never seen Ann Gotlib in my life," end quote, and that he had, quote, "absolutely no idea what may have happened to her," end quote. He added that because he was dying, he had no reason to lie. Right. So there you have it. If we believe that Gregory Oakley Jr. was the perpetrator of, which I do, there will never be real justice for the Gotlib family. Ann's father, Anatoly Gotlib, said in a phone interview with a local reporter that his family has suspected Oakley from the beginning, but even with the new information, there was some doubt. But I did want to point out that there is some good that came out of the abduction of Ann Gotlib, if you can call it good. During the early 1980s, experts around the country were looking to Louisville, Kentucky for innovative ways to keep children safe. In 1981, the head of the Louisville Jefferson County Crime Commission and Jefferson County Chief Administrative Officer Ernie Allen organized a conference in Louisville. He invited experts on teenage runaways, child pornography, kidnapping, and child prostitution. He also invited the parents of high-profile missing or abducted children to Louisville to speak on those issues. This included John and Reve Walsh, whose 6-year-old son, Adam, was abducted and murdered in Florida in 1981. The conference was the first of its kind. It helped organize a successful lobbying effort for the legislation needed to create the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In the past 35 years, the center has helped law enforcement with recovery of more than 311,000 missing children. The toll-free hotline has answered more than 4.9 million phone calls. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has facilitated training for more than 365,000 officers, criminal justice, and juvenile and healthcare professionals. Ann's case was one of the first to enter the system. It is now one of the oldest. Ann's remains have never been found. If you have any information regarding the abduction and murder of Ann Gotlib, please contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. Thank you for listening. If you like this content, please like and subscribe and hit that bell button on the way out. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode of Bullet Point.